Welcome to Broken Hearts of Reddit. Get ready to hear a story of betrayal that will chill you to the bone. This is a story about how, while I was serving my country, my stepfather, whom I had always considered my real father, and my wife, who had sworn to love me forever, joined forces against me and decided to completely destroy my life. I still can't believe my life was once so simple and transparent. Memories of those days now seem like scenes from a naive, foreign film. I, James, a 22-year-old recruit, left to serve, leaving my beautiful wife, Mary, at home. We married right after high school, still just kids, and our love was like a clear stream, transparent, ringing, and free of any obstacles. At least, that's what I thought. We lived in the house that I inherited from my mother. She had passed away when I was still a teenager. A few years after her death, my father, with whom I'd always had a strained relationship, brought a new woman into the house. She was younger than him, vibrant and energetic. With her came her son, Daniel. He was a few years older than me, but we quickly found common ground. He became more than just a brother. He became the best friend I had never had. My stepfather, whom I always called Daniel, and his mother, whom I considered my own, were my true family. When the draft notice came, I knew my place was there. To serve my country, to protect it. I left with a heavy heart, but with the certainty that my Mary was waiting for me at home. Our farewell night was filled with tears, promises, and passion. We swore to each other that we would wait, be faithful, and love each other despite the distance. She promised to write me letters every week, and I promised to call whenever I had the chance. And at first, that's exactly how it was. Mary's letters were full of tenderness. She told me about our plans, how much she missed me. In every word, I felt her love, her devotion. But as time went on, something began to change. The letters became shorter, less frequent, and they no longer had that sincere, childlike naivety. Instead of detailed descriptions of her day and our shared memories, they resembled reports. Everything's fine, missing you, waiting for you. I wrote it off as her being tired, or perhaps busy, or simply not knowing what to write about. But my doubts didn't give me peace. I started to notice her words becoming drier. I felt something slipping away from me, as if an invisible wall had appeared between us that I couldn't cross or understand. When I called, her voice sounded distant, as if she were talking to me from another room, putting no emotion into her words. She always found a reason to end the call. She was tired, or she had something she needed to do. I felt guilty for bothering her, for distracting her from her tasks. During one of the rare calls, I asked her about our son. Ever since our little one was born, he had been the meaning of my life. She coldly replied that he was fine. To my question about how he was doing, she said that he was growing up. She didn't talk about his new words, his first steps, or how he smiled. Before, she used to write about these things in every letter, and I, thousands of miles away, felt like I was right there with them. But now, nothing. Just silence, emptiness, indifference. And in that moment, I felt a crack for the first time. It was barely perceptible, like a thin, almost invisible line on perfectly smooth glass. I couldn't understand what caused it or what it meant, but I felt that something in my life, in my family, in my world had changed. I tried to convince myself it was just fatigue, that she was simply missing me, and it was weighing her down. But I knew that wasn't it. It was something else, something deep, something I couldn't name. I lay on my bunk, staring at the ceiling, and thought about our house, our bedroom, our life, which now seemed so distant. I remembered how we used to laugh, how we dreamed, how we made plans for the future. And now, All of it seemed like nothing but an illusion, a beautiful dream coming to an end. It felt like I had woken up, but all around me was only grayness and emptiness. I couldn't understand why. And that not knowing was the most terrifying thing of all. My service continued. Days blurred into weeks, weeks into months. I worked hard, trying to push the nagging thoughts of Mary out of my head, but they came back every time I was alone. I wrote her letters full of love and longing, but the replies became increasingly formal. These were no longer the letters of my wife. They were the letters of a stranger. In one of my letters, I told her how much I missed our son, how I dreamed of seeing him, and in response, I didn't get a letter from her, but a photograph. It was a simple, everyday picture. In it, Mary and our son were sitting on Daniel's lap, my stepfather's. She wrote that Daniel was helping her around the house and that they were all taking walks in the park with the baby. I found it strange, but didn't think much of it. I thought they had simply grown closer while I was away, and that was normal since Daniel had always been like a brother to me. He was part of my family. I trusted him. I couldn't get that photograph out of my head. It felt like there was something wrong with it, something I couldn't understand. I looked at it again and again, and then I noticed the details. Little things I wouldn't have noticed before. In the photo, it was clear that Mary was sitting too close to him, almost pressed against him. Their hands were touching. And on Daniel's face was not just a friendly smile, but a warm, tender, almost intimate one. The same was on Mary's face. It seemed to me that she wasn't just sitting next to a friend. She was enjoying his company, his closeness. In that moment, I felt my heart clench with pain. I couldn't understand the feeling. It wasn't jealousy. It was something else. It was the feeling of betrayal. I dismissed the thought. This was Daniel, my stepfather, my family. He would never do anything wrong. I tried to convince myself of this, but the doubts had already taken root in my soul. I started to notice that Mary's letters mentioned Daniel more and more. He was helping her with groceries, fixing something in the house, or playing with our son. She wrote about him with an unusual warmth that was missing from her letters to me. She wrote about how he took care of them, how he helped them with everything. I was glad they had support, but at the same time, I felt that I, as a husband, as a father, as the head of the family, was simply not in this picture. I began to feel redundant, unwanted, forgotten. One day, I called home to talk to Mary. I wanted to hear her voice, to make sure everything was okay. I called at an unusual time when I thought she would be home, but she didn't pick up. I called again and again, but no one answered. I started to get nervous. I couldn't understand what was happening. Where was she? Why wasn't she answering? I called several more times, but it was no use. An hour later, I got a message from Mary. She wrote that she had been visiting a friend and had forgotten her phone at home. But I knew it was a lie. I knew she never left her phone behind. It was her way of controlling all my calls, all my messages. I couldn't understand why she was lying to me. What was she hiding? That lie was the final straw. I started replaying all of our conversations, all her letters in my mind. I began to see inconsistencies that I hadn't noticed before. She said she was visiting a friend, but I heard an unusual tone in her voice. She said she missed me, but I felt her indifference. She said she loved me, but I didn't feel it. I only felt emptiness. And in that moment, I remembered how she said goodbye to me. She was crying, but her tears seemed like tears of relief. She said she would wait for me, but her eyes were empty. I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't believe it. I loved her. I trusted her. I believed in our love. But now I felt that it had all been a lie. And then it hit me. I remembered how she laughed that evening as I was packing my things. Her laughter was somehow insincere, unnatural. She was laughing as if she were glad I was leaving. I couldn't understand why I hadn't noticed it then. I was too naive, too blind. I loved her too much to see the truth. And in that moment, I felt my heart shatter into a million pieces. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to think. I just sat and stared into the empty space, trying to understand what was happening. I came home unexpectedly. I didn't warn anyone. I was given an unscheduled leave, and I decided to surprise them, a small one, just for a couple of days. I wanted to see Mary, our son, to hug them, to make sure everything was okay. Or maybe I just wanted to see the truth. I didn't know what was waiting for me. I was just driving home. My heart was beating so hard. I was afraid it would jump out of my chest. On the way, I imagined how happy they would be to see me, how Mary would throw her arms around my neck, how our son would hug me with his little hands. I imagined us sitting in the kitchen, laughing and telling each other about what had happened in our lives. I was so naive. I pulled up to the house. It was late. All the windows were dark, except for one in our bedroom. I felt a strange premonition. A shiver ran down my body. I got out of the car, grabbed my bag, and slowly walked to the house. I wanted to get in unnoticed, so as not to scare them. I had my own key. I quietly opened the door, stepped inside, and froze. The house was silent, too silent. Usually, at this time, Mary would be reading a fairy tale to our son, and then we would chat on the phone. But now, silence. I walked into the bedroom. The door was slightly ajar. I peeked inside, and then I saw them, Mary and Daniel. They were lying in our bed, my wife and my stepfather. I couldn't believe my eyes. I couldn't breathe. I just stood there and looked at them, as if at some horrible painting. My life, my love, my faith, everything collapsed in a single moment. I couldn't say anything. I just stood there and watched them sleep together. I couldn't believe this was happening. I couldn't believe my wife, my Mary, had done this. I couldn't believe my stepfather had betrayed me like this. I felt like I had been stabbed in the back. I felt my soul tearing apart. They slept as if it was meant to be, as if they were connected by something more than just friendship, as if they had been together for a long time. I couldn't understand how I could have been so blind. I couldn't understand how I could have failed to notice this. I stood there in complete silence and looked at them. And in that moment, I realized that everything I had thought about our life, our family, our love, was a lie. It was all just an illusion. A beautiful but empty dream that had ended. I felt a pain welling up in my chest. It was so intense that I couldn't breathe. I felt tears streaming down my face. I couldn't stop them. I just stood there and cried. I cried from the pain, the hurt, the humiliation. I cried because I had lost everything I had. I slowly left the room, trying not to make a sound. I didn't want to wake them. I didn't want them to see me. I didn't want them to know that I had seen everything. I just wanted to leave. I wanted to disappear. I wanted this never to have happened. I went out of the house, got in the car, and drove wherever the road took me. I drove down the empty streets, and in my head, only the same thoughts swirled. How could she? How could he? Why? I don't know how long I drove. I just drove, trying to escape from this terrible truth. But I couldn't. It was with me. It was inside me. and I knew it would be with me for the rest of my days. A few months passed. I stopped at a motel in another city, unable to return to my home, which now felt foreign to me. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I felt like I was going insane. I just sat and stared at a single point, trying to pick up the pieces of my life, but they were too small. I called my friend Mark. He was the only person I could trust. I told him everything I had seen, everything I had felt. He listened to me, in silence. And then he told me what I didn't want to hear. He said he knew, that he had suspected, that he had seen Mary and Daniel become too close. He had seen how they interacted, how they looked at each other. He had seen them hold hands when they thought no one was watching. He had seen them laugh together, how they spent time together. He had seen everything, but he didn't want to tell me. He was afraid I wouldn't believe him. He was afraid I would think he was jealous of me. I was furious. I screamed at him. I screamed at the whole world. How could they? How could they know and stay silent? How could they see that I was completely oblivious and not say a word to me? I felt betrayed, not just by my wife and stepfather, but by my friends as well. I felt alone, completely alone. I decided to go back. I had to talk to them. I had to find out the truth. I had to see their faces when they spoke their lies. I had to understand what I had done to them. Why did they do this to me? I arrived home. The house was empty. I found a note from Mary on the table. She wrote that she and our son had left, that they had decided to live with Daniel, that it would be better for them. She wrote that they needed time to think, that she needed to sort out her feelings. In that moment, I realized that they hadn't just betrayed me. They had planned all of this. They had used me while I was in the army. They had used my naivety, my faith, my love. They had been living a double life, and I was just their puppet. I went to Daniel's place. I knocked on the door. He opened it. He was surprised to see me. He tried to smile, but his smile was somehow unnatural, strained. He invited me in. I went inside, and I saw our son playing on the floor. And Mary, who was sitting next to him, she was also surprised to see me. She stood up, walked over to me. She wanted to hug me, but I pushed her away. I looked at them, and in my head, only the same questions swirled. How long? Why? What for? They were silent. I saw shame in their eyes. I saw fear. I saw how afraid they were. They were afraid of my reaction. They were afraid of the truth. I couldn't hold myself back. I started to yell. I yelled at Mary. I yelled at Daniel. I screamed that they had betrayed me, that they had lied to me, that they had destroyed my life. I screamed that they had taken everything I had from me. And then Daniel said something I didn't expect to hear. He said that he had always loved Mary, that he had loved her from the first day he saw her, that he had always dreamed of her. He said that they didn't want to do this, but they couldn't control their feelings. I couldn't believe my ears. I looked at him, and it felt like I was seeing a stranger who was supposed to be my brother, whom I had loved so much, a stranger who was my stepfather, whom I had considered my father. And then Mary told me that she loved Daniel too, that she had always loved him, that she had only married me because I looked like him. I felt something snap in my chest. I felt used, humiliated. I felt like the most pathetic person on earth. My world collapsed. Mary and Daniel's words echoed in my head, mixing with the sound of blood rushing in my ears. You looked like him. Those words burned the most. I wasn't just betrayed. I was a shadow, a replacement, a fake. My life turned out to be someone else's game, and I was an unsuspecting pawn. I looked at them, at these two people who were my everything, and I didn't recognize them. Daniel, my stepfather, with whom I had shared secrets and dreams, was now a stranger. There was no hint of remorse in his eyes, just a strange, almost triumphant calm. And Mary, my Mary, with whom I had spent so many years, with whom I had shared a bed and dreams of the future, stood next to him, holding his hand, and looked at me with regret, but without pain, as if I were just an unpleasant phase they had to get through. I don't remember what I said to them. My voice was hoarse. Words escaped my lips like stones. I shouted about betrayal, about lies, about a destroyed family. I talked about our son, about what they had done to his future. But it was as if they didn't hear me, or didn't want to hear me. They just stood there and looked at me like a madman, which I probably was. And then Daniel said a phrase that finally broke me. He said that they wanted to sue me, that they wanted to get full custody of our son and all my property, my mother's house, the house that was my inheritance, my fortress. They wanted to take everything I had from me, leaving me with nothing. This was a blow below the belt. I couldn't believe they were capable of such a vile act. I, who had just returned from service, who had risked my life for my country, was supposed to lose my son, my home, everything I held dear because of their betrayal. My mind refused to accept it. I was suffocating with anger and despair. I looked at Daniel, at Mary, at the child who didn't understand what was happening, and I realized that my life had turned into hell. I felt trapped, with no way out. I left, not by slamming the door, not by shouting another word. I just left, like a shadow, like a ghost. I got in the car and drove wherever the road took me. Anywhere, just to get away from them, from that house, from that pain. I drove blindly, through a rain of my own tears. My brain was working overtime, trying to find some way out, some solution. But nothing came to mind, only emptiness. A few months have passed since then. I live in another city, renting a small apartment. I managed to get a temporary job to make ends meet somehow. I don't sleep at night, remembering their faces, their words. The images of their betrayal haunt me, giving me no peace. They filed a lawsuit. My lawyer says the chances are slim, that they were well prepared, that they have witnesses who will confirm that I am an unreliable father. I don't know how they did it, but I know it's a lie. My son is all I have, and they want to take him away from me. I sit by the window, looking at the city at night, and I think about my son, about how he is growing up without me, about how he will live with them, with the people who betrayed his father. I don't know what will happen next. I don't know if I will ever be able to forgive them, or to forgive myself for my naivety. My life is shattered. I have lost my love, my family, my home. I have lost faith in people, in kindness, in justice. I am left alone, with my pain and my grief, and I don't know if I will ever find the strength to live again.